Hello, TEDx. My name is Ibtisam, and I'm very happy to be here back home. I've just moved back 3 days ago after having been abroad for the last four and a half years, and what an experience these last few years have been. I've talked so much about Malta and invited so many people here that one would think I'm hired with some touristic office. I've been numerous times questioned, where do I come from? And sometimes I do have to show where Malta is on a map, but I'm always so proud to say I'm Maltese. And while I was abroad, my Maltese identity was never doubted, and I did not have to emphasize my Malteseness, which was very refreshing. Yeah. But I get questioned the very same question here in Malta. I speak Maltese, it's my native language, but despite this, when I say that my name is Ibtisam, which is an Arabic name, it means to smile, or when I say I'm Muslim and I don't drink, something happens. People give me skeptical looks and some random guesses at my origin, and also indirect questions, and sometimes the very blunt, but where are you really from? Well, thanks for asking. I'm from Enclave, a small village in the middle of Malta, and I'm Maltese and Muslim, and one does not contradict the other. There are Maltese Muslims here, and I know we do not fit in the rhetoric of Malta as a Roman Catholic country, but we do exist like Protestant Maltese, Hindu Maltese, among many others that live here, and this is just a fraction of the beauty and the richness of Maltese identities. My parents, they met in the late 70s. They met through some mutual friends. My father is Libyan and my mother is Maltese. And a few years after they met, my mother converted to Islam out of religious conviction, and they got married here in Malta. They had a civil marriage before the marriage registrar and a Muslim marriage before the imam in the Maltese mosque. Eventually, they had me and my two brothers, and because of their common beliefs, they raised us as Muslim. And this meant that we celebrated Muslim festivities like Eid. We fasted in Ramadan from sunrise to sunset. We don't have alcohol or pork at home. But it also meant that we have Christmas dinners and Easter dinners, and we were always dressed up for Carnival, and we mourn in funerals, and we also celebrate weddings with our family and friends. For example, here I am picking my nose at my uncle's wedding. When I was 7 years, I was a bridesmaid, and recently I was maid of honor to my best friend and her church wedding. So I studied law at the University of Malta, and after 2 years practicing as a lawyer, I went off to the University of Amsterdam to do research for my PhD in anthropology as part of a project, ERC project, that compares different types of Muslim marriages and how they are problematized. And for my law dissertation, and also afterwards, I did several interviews here in Malta with couples just like my parents who started out their courtship while they identified with different religions. And so whether or not at a later stage one of them converted. And so for my PhD, I wanted to do similar research, anthropological research, in Ceuta, which is a Spanish enclave across the Straits of Gibraltar on the North African coast, and it shares a border with Morocco. Ceutans take pride in their mixed environment of Muslims and Christians and smaller numbers of Hindus and Jews living relatively peacefully together within the enclave. And I wanted to see what is it like to be an interfaith couple within this context where Muslims and Christians are almost equal in number. And how do they navigate their differences and how are they perceived in society? So in the late 2015, with broken Spanish jumbled up with Italian and my knowledge of Arabic and English, I headed off to Ceuta, where I was for 14 months, conducting interviews with Ceutans, Moroccans, and also Peninsulars, so Spaniards who moved from mainland Spain to Ceuta. And while I was there, at every interaction, people were curious, where did I come from? And why am I there? And it was such a relief, once again, that my background was not a handicap. On the contrary, people appreciated my mixedness, and my social groups of Muslims and Christians continuously grew. So I was welcomed in people's home. I was invited to their events. For example, this is a Muslim wedding that I went to, a local Ceutan wedding. And these are some pictures from the henna event where the bride, together with her female family and friends, get henna on their hands and feet as part of the wedding ceremony. And interfaith couples, they really took me in and they gave me insight of what it's like to be an interfaith couple in Ceuta. And the trajectories of these couples, how they meet, how they start courtship, how they get married vary. And I'll be showing some pictures of the wedding celebrations, some civil marriages, some religious, some conduct both, some conduct multiple religious ceremonies, and even an infusion of multiple religions put together. I'll be showing some pictures, but for the privacy of the couples, the stories that I will be sharing do not correspond with the pictures that I'll be showing. So couples meet in different places and have some stories are more common than others, and some have these serendipitous meetings. But every story was particular and had a special detail of its own. Both in Malta and in Ceuta, couples smiled and laughed as they recounted how they met or all the strategies involved so that they could meet in hiding. And some even were emotional and cried as they remembered the heartbreak when their family and friends rejected or opposed to their relationships. So, for instance, Habiba and her husband, Jose, they are Ceutan neighbors, and as they say, they knew each other since practically forever. And when they were 16, they started dating in secret. And it's understandable that most couples do so, at least for some time, and actually sometimes it takes weeks, months, and even years before they reveal their relationship to their families in fear of the opposition that they will face. And because if they do reveal the relationship, they might be forbidden from meeting. So they first test the relationship. So Habiba and Jose, they start dating, but it didn't last in secret very long. Habiba's brother got suspicious, and they tell me how relieved they were when their families accepted their relationship and approved. And they think that it was because they knew the partner before they knew that they were in a relationship together. Eventually, they have a civil marriage, and now, 15 years later, they have 3 kids, and they are teaching them about both religions. So, some couples are not so lucky, and some get caught red-handed, or some nosy neighbor goes and tells the parents, and then they get forbidden from continuing their relationship. Some end up breaking up, and others do get married, despite that, for instance, their parents do not approve of the relationship, and they do so without their blessing without their blessings or attendance, which is heartbreaking for them. And some even have eloped. I've met, for instance, a Muslim Hindu couple who eloped to India because he had some relatives there, and they got married there. And then several months later, her family, who was the Muslim family, asked them to return, and now they are all in good relationship. So conversion seems to be another step that couples need to supersede when it comes to their families, right? For example, despite that, this love is considered as this enigma, right? This external force that takes over any self-control or common sense, and it's perceived as this external thing that takes over even any warnings that Christian women get about dating Muslim men. They're told, be careful, he will convert you to Islam, he will force you into wearing the hijab, and he won't let you see your family or friends. For instance, Angela and Yusuf, 2 years after they started dating, Angela introduces Yusuf to her family. And several years later, Yusuf introduces Angela to his. And the couple, their families, they both hope that this was some adolescent nonsense that would go away and they would break up. But in their 20s, the couple are still together and they decide they want to live together. So they strategize and try to find a way how to navigate their personal desire to be together with the expectations of their families. And they have this perfect plan. They have a Muslim marriage in front of his family. They don't tell hers. And till today, her external family, for instance, doesn't know about this Muslim marriage. And they go to the imam and they marry Islamically, but they don't register it before the marriage registrar in Ceuta. And without these formalities, the marriage is not recognized before the state. So the plan is that one day, which happened to be 5 years and 1 daughter later, they marry civilly and they have this big wedding ceremony and celebration afterwards with all their family and friends, where she wears a white dress and they have a photographer. Until today, they call their weddings the his and hers, the one that's for him and the one that's for her. So as I said earlier, conversion is often another obstacle that the couples must supersede. For instance, in Malta, Charmaine and her husband Ahmed, after 6 months, they had to decide whether to continue to be together or break up because his visa was going to expire and he would have to leave Malta. And they decide they want to get married, and they tell Charmaine's parents, who are very surprised that she wants to marry a Libyan Muslim because she used to go to mosque every day. But despite their initial apprehension, they agree and they go with her and Ahmed to the marriage registrar and they get married civilly. But they warn her that they're not going to let her live with him until they have a church marriage because for them, she's not married. So the couple continues dating. She's living with her parents. They continue dating, chaperoned by her parents. And 6 months later, they want to live together, so they agree with her parents to have a church wedding with a huge ceremony, all organized and paid for by her father. So the couple move in together, and a few months later, Ahmed tells her that he doesn't feel that he's following religious rules because he's not religiously married Islamically. So the couple agree, and they go to the Maltese mosque, and they also marry Islamically. So 3 marriages, right? 3 marriages, a decade later, and 4 kids later, Charmaine decides that she would like to convert out of internal conviction. And 2 years after that, she wears the hijab. And her parents take it very badly. They refuse any contact, and they asked her no longer to come visit them. And Charmaine remembers how these months until the relationship healed once again, how difficult this period was. And she explains to me that it's not because they are religious, because they were not religious at all, but the objection was because of society, because of what would the neighbors say when they see me in hijab going into their house. So you see, conversion is another step that couples often have to, once again, supersede, not just their interfaith relationship. Not all conversions are religiously motivated. For example, there are many couples in Ceuta where there is a Spaniard who is usually the husband, and the wife, who is usually Moroccan, get married and move to Ceuta because they think it's the perfect bridge between Africa and Europe, and it's ideal for them to bridge their different backgrounds. So, for example, Antonio, he's from mainland Spain, and he moves to Sahara for work purposes. And there he meets Fatma, and the two of them start meeting in secret. And they tell me how they fell in love despite that they had religious differences and despite that they had age difference of 25 years. So the couple start dating, and they have a plan. They want to get married, but they don't want to reveal the relationship to her parents because otherwise they would be forbidden from meeting. So the first thing they do is they prepare the documents. And the first document they prepare is the certificate of conversion. And they explain they did this because it doesn't expire. So this is the first document they prepare. They prepare everything within 2 years from their first meeting. They go... Antonio, practically all prepped up by Fatma, goes and introduces himself to her family in Sahara, and he explains that he would like to marry her. And despite initial apprehension by the mother of Fatma, they get approval and they get married. They fast forward to 6 years, actually, to the future. They move to Ceuta, again for work purposes, and thinking that this is an ideal bridge between their backgrounds. And they found out that there they are considered a marriage of convenience. They are labeled as such because of their nationality difference, because of their age, because of the short time spent between meeting for the first time and getting married, and the difference in social class. And this happens a lot also in Malta, where interfaith couples who are also transnational, just like my parents, right, from different countries, they usually get labeled as marriage of convenience. And it's always it's always the non-European partner that's considered malicious, that's getting married only for documents and citizenship. For instance, Ikram, she is a Moroccan woman, and she told me that when she married her husband, Spanish husband, his family thought that she was marrying him for citizenship, and that once she acquired the documents she needed, she will run away. She acquired citizenship, and the couple was happy, so they continued to stay together. And his family started saying that she was with him for the money. Eventually, he lost his job, and for several years, because of the bad economy, she was the only income that the couple had. And then that's when his family started accepting her as part of their family. So it's really interesting to see that love, despite it's accepted as this divine being, when it comes to interfaith couples, and especially when it comes to interfaith national couples, there needs to be sacrifice. It needs to be inconvenient for the love to be seen, like, let's say, from the outside. I get asked a lot, are interfaith couples successful? Are their marriages and relationships successful? And usually I just say that this is not the purpose of my research. But today I'm going to share some ideas about what I think about this question. As a lawyer, I would say, let's look at statistics. Let's look at the data of divorce and see what are the divorce rates. And it seems that interfaith couples are not likely more or less to have a divorce as much as any other couple. As an anthropologist, I would ask, what is a successful marriage, and what is a successful marriage for these couples? And it seems that one of the important factors for these couples is that their marriage is recognized in society, but also that their families support their relationship. And so what was particularly interesting and what struck me both in Malta and in Ceuta is that very often interfaith couples do get approval by time of their families. And sometimes this is decades later and many grandchildren later. But what struck me is that I met even a lot of couples who told me that their parents disapproved of their partner, of their marriage choice, but by time, they became their favorite son or daughter-in-law, and because of the respect that they were continuously shown. So throughout my interviews, I've learned a few things. First of all, that time does heal. It removes the sense of bitterness and angerness from parents towards their children for crossing religious and social norms. Second of all, very often, besides wanting your children to follow religious rules, very often it comes from this opposition. It comes from a fear of the unknown. They don't know much about Islam or Christianity. And when they start getting to know their son or daughter-in-law, they start to see them as humans first, not as the stereotypes, the religious stereotypes. Third of all, Grandchildren do bridge gaps. Grandparents usually adore their grandchildren. And finally, while it's true that very often these couples need to navigate and negotiate their differences, such as circumcision of their sons or food prohibitions or naming of their children, but doesn't every couple need to negotiate their differences even when they come from the same faith? They might be mixed on the basis of nationality or customs or language. Maybe two Maltese people, one speaks English and the other Maltese. As a couple, they also need to negotiate these differences. Or social class. So at the end of the day, aren't we all mixed in one way or another? And these interfaith couples, on a day-to-day basis, they don't argue about their religion. They argue about who has to do the laundry, who has to change the diaper, and whose parents are they going to visit next weekend. Thank you.